Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 11, Day 4. Today's journal, I'd like for you to write a paragraph that details the progression of the Korean War. Was it completely one-sided, or was the war back and forth? Choose a side and then explain your position. Okay, today's notes, we're going to be talking about the Red Scare. Okay, and we've already talked about the Red Scare once. Still talking about much of the same essential questions, trying to answer all of these. And one thing going on during this time, especially kind of building into the Cold War, we have things going on in the United States that don't pertain to communism or Russia, but they do end up kind of being tied to that in some ways. Okay, Jackie Robinson was one of the first African American MLB players, winning Rookie of the Year and MVP. He is considered by many as one of the best African American baseball players to ever play. He's also one of the best baseball players in general to ever play. Blacks were pressing for an end to discrimination during this time, demanding the outlawing of lynching and ending poll taxes. Right, poll taxes are designed to keep those who have less money away from the voting polls. Okay, obviously we've done away with a lot of those types of things now. Truman believed that segregation undermined the campaign against the USSR, and so this, idea that we're trying to go against communism and all these things. Racial integration was one of those things we needed to do in order to combat communism in our country. In result of that, okay, he established the President's Committee on Civil Rights in 1946, looking for ways to try to end segregation. The entire time that Truman was president, he had a little plaque on his desk that the buck stops here, meaning that he held himself accountable for his own actions and that somebody should hold themselves accountable for one's actions, that you shouldn't worry about other people. You should take care of yourself. And as president, he felt like it was his responsibility to do that. Okay, the Taft-Hartley Act, which monitored the power of labor unions, was one of those policies that passed during his presidency. And he tried to veto it because he believed it was his responsibility to protect workers and unions. But obviously, he was overridden. In 1948, he integrates the military. Ending segregation in the military is one of the first steps towards civil rights for African Americans. And in the election of 1948, Southern Democrats were upset about segregation and formed their own party called the Dixiecrats. Running Strom Thurmond, they thought they were going to get Truman out. Okay, and one of the things that happens here, and you can see the press, I believe it was George Dewey. They had ran this article in the Chicago Tribune that George Dewey had defeated President Truman in the election, when in fact Truman had actually won the election. Just a famous picture there as Truman celebrates his victory in the election of 1948. After the election, Truman asserted his belief that everyone had a right to a fair deal, and his proposal of civil rights, national health care, and aid to education was a big part of that. Congress raised the minimum wage, security benefits, and coverage. Okay, so Truman did a lot for people during his presidency. He also passed the Displaced Persons Act of 1948, granting over 205,000 non-Jewish Holocaust survivors entry into the U.S. Okay, so refugees who were fleeing persecution and could not go back to their home country. Now, when we get to the Red Scare, one of the things that, Truman letting these people in has a lot to do with the same things that we're seeing today, in that there's refugees that we've tried to let in from Syria and various other countries in during our time, and people have been very upset about it. Many people were upset about this because they were afraid of the communists, the Reds, quote unquote. In the 1950s, rumors of communists in the U.S. government government had tapped into fears that Reds were taking over the world. Okay, there was this idea and this belief that there were communists who had infiltrated the American government, and they were stealing government secrets, stealing government plans. And there's a little bit of information that we know now to say that they weren't completely wrong. In September of 1945, a clerk named Igor Guzenko walked out of the Soviet embassy in Canada carrying documents revealing a campaign to infiltrate the government of the United States and Canada to gain information about the atomic bomb. So basically, they had not only infiltrated the United States, there was Reds that had infiltrated Canada as well. And there is definitely information to show that they had infiltrated Canada. During the I believe it was after the Korean conflict or the Korean War, so sometime in the 60s, 70s, they found a jet that looked just like one of the Canadian jets that the Canadians had prototyped that had never been built. They found a jet in Russia that looked just like it a couple years after they scrapped the project because they were afraid that communists had stolen it. But that's for another day. Now, the proof that America had this red fever, quote unquote, you could be fired from your government job if you didn't sign a loyalty pledge saying that you were not a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. You're targeted if you didn't go to church, if you were a homosexual, if you spoke out against the government. Pretty much if you did anything that people didn't like, you were called a communist, and you could basically go to jail. But you could get out of prison time if you gave up other communists and basically denounced your communist ties. By 1949, the Soviet Union tested the atomic bomb, which obviously only made red fears go up. China had also fallen to communism and was completely communistic at this time, leading into the Korean War. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were two that were prosecuted and executed for passing atomic bomb secrets to the USSR. These events seemed to prove that the U.S. was losing the Cold War. Okay, and remember, a Cold War means there's no fighting, or there's no real fighting. It's kind of fighting through policy. And the Rosenbergs stealing these, or trying to pass these plans of the atomic bombs to Russia was kind of our fears realized. The House on Un-American Activities Committee had formed in 1938, and their whole job was to investigate communist and fascist activities in the U.S., and they're going to begin doing that quite dramatically over the next few years. Okay, but we'll talk about that more going into day 5. Here's your vocabulary. Please make sure you're keeping up with all of your assignments and your vocabulary. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I'll talk to you soon.